Welcome everybody to this week's problem set, which is problem set number 6, and will deal with the topic of legislatures. So exercise number 1, consider a town school board consisting of 3 representatives. Representative 1 represents the rich area of town, representative 2 the middle class area, and representative 3 the poor area. The school board must choose how much to spend on the town's public school. There are 3 possible spending levels: high, denoted by PH, medium, denoted by PM, and low, denoted by PL, where, high spending is higher than medium spending is higher than lower spending. School spending is financed by taxes on the town's residents. Representative 1's utility function is such that he prefers high spending before low spending before medium spending. This reflects the fact that the rich will send their children to private school unless the public school is funded at a high level, and if they're not going to use the public school, they rather prefer PL to PM because their taxes will be lower. Representative 2's utility function is such that he prefers medium spending before high spending before low spending. This reflects the fact that the middle class will always use the public school and CPM as the optimal balance between school quality and affordable taxes. Representative 3's utility function is such that he or she prefers low spending before medium spending before high spending. This reflects the fact that the poor will always use the public school and having less income is and having less income to pay taxes, CPL as the optimal balance between school quality and affordable taxes. So in sub exercise A, we are asked to show that there exists no Condorcet winner in this example. So for this kind of preferences of the representatives. So how do we solve this? Well, we solve this by confronting each of like the spending times like bilaterally to each other, and then we see what will happen. So 1A, let's first consider the bilateral situation between high and low spending. So high versus low spending. So representative 1 will do what? So if there's an election between high versus low spending, the first representative will vote for high spending. So he will vote for PH. The second representative will vote for PH as well because he prefers PH to PL. And the third representative is the only one who votes for PL. And as a consequence, so I'm not sure whether in the exercise description it was said that it's simple majority. So something like, oh, okay, I mean, it should be implicitly clear, but just to, it's not a unanimous decision. So simple majority is enough here. So since 2 have voted for high spending or would have voted for high spending, it means that PH wins. Now let's consider high versus medium spending. So high versus medium spending. In this case, 1 would vote for high, 2 would vote for medium, and 3 would vote for medium as well. As a consequence, PM wins. So medium spending. And now the last the situation is medium versus low. Medium versus low spending. So now representative 1 will vote for low. Representative 2 will vote for medium. And representative 3 will vote for low. As a consequence, PL wins. So what we have now is the following. So if the bilateral situation is given by PH being confronted with PL, we get PH as a winner. If PH is confronted with PM, PM is the winner. If PM is confronted with PL, then PL is the winner. So what we have now is an intransitivity. For this example, intransitivity, because high beats low, medium beats high, and low beats medium. Yeah. So if it would be transitive, it should follow from high beating low, and so from high beating low and high. Oh, I'm just sorry, just 1 second. So if it would be transitive, what should follow is that if high would beat medium and medium should beat low, or if medium should beat should kind of beat slow, then the consequence is that high should beat slow. Okay, so those are transitive kind of preferences or social choice kind of preferences. So there are no circles basically. And what you have here is such a circle because basically every time that we confront one of the spending levels to each other, another level of spending is winning. Yeah. So what should actually follow is some kind of transitivity, and this is kind of reflected in the Condorcet winner. Yeah. So the Condorcet winner is basically the one which would somehow, in a transitive way, beat all the other options when there is a bilateral confrontation. Good. Sorry for the confusion. So in B, we are asked the following. So in B, we are asked to show that the representatives utility function do not satisfy the single crossing property. And actually, this is quite short because if you look at the single crossing property in the topic of social choice, what should follow is that if the representative who has a preference for medium spending is preferring medium to low spending, then a person or an agent who is having higher preferences for more spending than the medium representative, then this person should also prefer medium spending and should strictly prefer actually, or no, it should be weekly, should also weekly prefer medium spending before low spending. Since one prefers more spending compared to 2. Okay, so the single crossing property would say that if there is a person who, in the terms of spending, the spending dimension has higher preferences for spending, then if individual with the lower preferences, so here in this case, representative 2 is preferring some amount of spending before another, so here PM is larger than PL, then also the individual, or here the representative, who has even higher incentives for higher spending, should also prefer PM over PL. But what we see here is that representative 1 actually strictly prefers low spending before medium spending. Therefore, the single crossing property is violated. So basically, it's so if the single crossing property is violated, it kind of has consequences for the situation where we are aggregating preferences into a social choice function, which is mapping from the individual preferences into the preferences of the society as a whole. And if the single crossing property is violated, then there is kind of there is a restriction in what the social choice function at the end can say and cannot say. Okay, yeah, this was sub-exercise B. So let us have a look on sub-exercise C. Suppose that the school board uses the following simple decision-making mechanism. One representative is randomly selected to propose level spending. The representatives then all vote for or against this proposal. If there are at least 2 votes for, the proposal is implemented. Otherwise, spending remains at the status quo level, which is PM. Describe what will happen. How would your answer change if the status quo spending were level PL? Okay, so this is C. And we start with PM is the status quo. Okay, so what we will do now is, so first for the situation where PM is the status quo, we will go through all situations. So we will go to the first case where representative 1 is chosen to make a proposal, then representative 2, then representative 3. And for each of the cases, we will basically derive what will happen. Yeah, so we will solve each of the sub games basically of this more general game. And then we will see, depending on what the status quo is, what possible outcomes we have. Yeah, there will be some surprising results depending on the status quo. So the outcome depends on the status quo, basically. And as before, here we have simple majority, so we need 2 people to vote against, such that it's, or we need 2 people to vote for the proposal such that it is implemented. If there is simply one person, or if there is just one person, like propose, if it's only the proposer who says yes, then it will not be implemented and the status quo will be implemented. In addition, which is not mentioned here in the exercise description, is that the representatives are strategic. Yeah, so representatives are strategic. I'll just shortcut it. Representatives are strategic. So they do not vote sincerely, but they vote strategically in order to maximize their utility. If they would be sincerely, so if they would vote sincerely, it would mean that they simply vote according to their preferences. Good, so let's start with the first case. Representative, I will shortcut it with R. Representative 1 is chosen. And now we will go through all the possible proposals that he can make. So if he proposes PH, so proposes PH. Then representative 2 and representative 3 vote against. It. The reason is that if representative 1 is proposing PH, it basically means that it's either PH or PM, the status quo. And since both representative 2 and representative 3 prefer PM over PH, they simply vote, both of them vote against it, such that PM will be implemented. So let me write it like this. So as a consequence, PM will be implemented. Okay, the second thing that you could propose is PM. If he proposes PM, it means that representative 2 will vote for, since he, like, PM is his highest, kind of, is the peak of his preferences, of his utility, and representative 3 is indifferent. Actually, also representative 2 is indifferent because independent of what happens, either it's PM or it's PM. So yeah, just to be more precise, I think in the solution manual I wrote that representative 2 votes for PM, but actually he's also indifferent. So as a consequence, PM will be implemented. Now the last case, I will just make everything a little bit smaller so it fits on one page. So the last case would refer to representative 1 proposing PL. So if he does so, then representative 3 will vote for, and representative 2 is indifferent. Why is he indifferent? Because obviously he knows that representative 3 has a strict preference for PL, so he will certainly vote for, and then he is not pivotal anymore. So the second, so the medium, so the representative who prefers medium spending is indifferent because he cannot change the outcome of the election with his choice. Therefore, he can either vote for it or against it. It wouldn't matter. So as a consequence, PL will be implemented. So to summarize everything, if the status quo is PM and representative 1 is chosen to make a proposal, either PM or PL will be chosen or will be implemented. So there is no way that he can make a proposal of high spending and it will be actually implemented, even though it is his highest preference and he is the one who's making the proposal. Okay, now let's come to the case where representative 2 is chosen. So here we had representative 1 is chosen, and now representative 2 is chosen. Now we go again through his proposals. So now he proposes PM. If representative 2 proposes PM, then the choice is PM against PM. So R1 and R2 are indifferent. As a consequence, PM will be implemented. And this basically finishes the analysis for representative 2 because he can make a proposal such that his kind of the level that he prefers most is implemented, and hence we do not need to cover all the other cases. Yeah, so if representative 2 is chosen, he will propose PM, and since representative 1 and representative 2 are indifferent, then they can simply vote against or for it. It will not change the outcome because it will be PM anyways, because it's the status quo. Therefore, PM will be implemented. And then we can immediately go to representative 3. So here it's PM will be chosen or will be implemented. Now let us consider the situation where representative 3 is chosen. And for him, what he can do is the following. If he proposes PL, what will happen then? So, representative 1, what will he do? So it's low spending versus the status quo medium spending. Therefore, representative 1 will obviously vote for. And since representative 1 is certainly voting for, representative 2 is indifferent because he cannot change the outcome of the election with his choice. Again, he's not pivotal in this situation because he knows for certain with certainty that representative 1 will vote for the proposal if representative 3 is chosen to make a proposal and he proposes PL. Therefore, PL will be implemented. And since it's so PL, which will be implemented then, is the most preferred proposal or level of spending for representative 3, it follows that if he gets elected, he will simply propose PL and then PL will be actually implemented. So basically, it means that PL will be implemented. So what we have now is that if representative 1 is chosen, then either PM or PL will be implemented. And actually, this is not fully correct. So either PM or PL will be implemented. And obviously, since representative 1 is strictly preferring PL before PM, he will make a proposal such that PL will be implemented, which means that he will propose PL. Yes, so basically it means that PL will be implemented here if representative 1 will be chosen. I forgot to mention this before. So PL will be implemented. So basically now what we have is that if representative 1 is chosen, then PL will be implemented. If representative 2 is chosen, PM will be implemented. And if representative 3 is chosen, then PL will be implemented, which means that if the status quo is PM and if the representatives are strategic, it cannot happen that the highest level of spending is implemented with this voting mechanism. And this brings us to the second status quo. So let's see how the outcomes are going to change if the status quo is PL. So status quo is PL. Now we start again with representative 1. So representative 1 is chosen. Now if you propose PH, so he proposes PH. So what will happen then? If he proposes PH, then 2 will vote for. And since 2 will vote for, it doesn't matter what representative 3 is doing. So P is indifferent. And as a consequence, PH will be implemented. So basically, it means that PH will at the end be implemented. And since this is the highest, preference for representative 1, it means that if he gets chosen to make a proposal, he will choose PH and PH will actually be implemented. So then we're done with representative 2. Now representative 2, so we're done with representative 1, sorry. So now let's consider representative 2. He will be chosen. And now let's assume that he proposes PM. So what he prefers most. If he proposes PM, then representative 2, I forgot the R's here, sorry. So not representative 2. Representative 1 and representative 3 will vote against. And the reason is that both of them prefer the status quo PL before PM. Yeah, so in their preferences, both of them prefer PL before PM. And since it's a status quo, and if representative 2 would propose PM, it would be PM versus the status quo PL. Both of them will vote against, and as a consequence, PL will be implemented. So let's go through the other types of proposals that representative 2 can make, because PL is not his highest kind of preference, it's even his lowest preferences. So let's make this a little smaller here. Good. So now representative 2 is proposing PH. If he proposes PH, then representative 3 at 1 will vote for, and representative 3 is indifferent because he's not pivotal given the behavior of representative 1. And the consequence is that PH will be implemented. So just to summarize here PL wins, and here PH wins. Now the last case for representative 2 is given by the situation where he is proposing PL. Let's see what happens then. So now representative 2 is proposing PL. Now, if he proposes PL, then representative 1 and representative 3 are indifferent. Because it's the status quo, and if he proposes PL, it will be PL independent of what representative 1 and 3 are doing. Therefore, PL will be implemented. So as a consequence, in total, PL will be implemented here. So now, if you consider the options that representative 2 has, is that independent of what he's doing, either PL or PH wins, he will choose to propose PH because he prefers high spending more than low spending. Just let me check that this is correct. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So as a consequence, he will propose high spending. So let's go to the final situation. So now we have representative 3. And since representative 3 prefers the status quo, he will simply propose QL. And both representative 1 and representative 2 are indifferent because it's QL versus QL. So QL wins, which means, sorry, not Q, it should be a P. So PL wins or will be implemented. Therefore, it will be PL here. So if we now consider all the possible options or like outcomes, depending on who's chosen to make a proposal, when the status quo is PL, what we see is that it will be either PL or PH. So with status quo, QL, PL, either PL or PH wins, depending on who's chosen. With status quo PM, either PL or PM wins. Yes, so depending on the status quo, the possible outcomes of this election mechanism here differs. Yeah, so that's kind of the punchline of this exercise, to show that the status quo matters in that it obviously affects strategic voters. Here, the voters are representatives in a way that, yeah, they will consider the status quo and what others will propose in their decision making. And this finishes this exercise.